morning. Welcome to Inside Texas Football, powered by InsideTexas.com. Ian and I are here today to talk to you about the spread and what that means. Ian has written several articles. We're going to kind of focus on that first iteration, or the first in the series, which essentially just establishes some of the basics of the spread, what it is, why it exists, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. So, Ian, just to start us off, uh, what defines the spread offense? And I think maybe another way of framing that for people, especially of a certain era, they may think of the air raid as a spread. So, can you kind of define maybe both of those, how they're different, how they're the same?
Yeah, I think spread offense is basically any offense that primarily plays with three receivers on the field. You can get a lot more spread out than that. If you really want to stand out nowadays, you have to get more spread out than that. But three receivers is kind of the deal, because that shifting to starting with three receivers was a big transition in college football. Everybody was playing with a running back and a fullback and two receivers and a tight end, or they were playing with two tight ends. So they had bigger personnel on the field that didn't leave enough room to play with three receivers before you got to the number 11, right?
Right.
And specifically, teams went to three receivers to spread opponents out. Like, instead of trying to beat them mano a mano in the box, what if we tried to attack them out there where there's more space, and let's put people out there in more space to get after them that way. So any offense that is primarily based around having three receivers or more on the field is a spread offense, which at this point in football is almost every single offense.
Right. So then, to clarify that and put in summation, is the air raid a spread offense?
The air raid is a subset within the spread offense category.
Sure. Okay, great. And
sorry, maybe worth pointing out, the Mike Leach air raid, that, like, Texas fans, you think air raid, and a lot of Texas fans of a certain age think the Mike Leach teams. So
right.
The offensive linemen are really far apart from each other. There's almost never a tight end at all. Four receivers split. Little white guys pulled from rural West Texas or Oklahoma that are like inexplicably difficult to cover. Fifth-year senior quarterbacks. The air raid persists to this day. If you think of it as like guys that were coached by Mike Leach or learned from Mike Leach and applied his lessons, but most of them have regressed to the mean in terms of strategy. So Leach was the only guy that was still that all in on, we're going to freaking throw the ball like every single time.
Right. And one of the things that you pointed out in your article is the spread offense was a specific answer to a defense that was emerging in college football. And can you expand on that a little bit?
Can you say that again? The air raid is
Yeah, so not the air raid, but the spread offense, the one that we know today, really came about as an answer to a specific defense that was starting to establish itself. And can you expand on that a little bit? Well, primarily, I guess what I'm getting at is loading the box, right? They were basically challenging the run game, and what you point out in the article is exactly what you just said earlier. Pushing the defenses to the periphery lightened the box, which gave teams an opportunity to exploit that.
Yeah. So you had teams would try to spread people out and throw the ball around all the time. There's the Mike Leach team. There was a famous Purdue team like that with Drew Brees in the 90s. It was very uncommon. It was considered kind of an underdog sort of strategy, an ungentlemanly, asymmetrical way to play.
Right.
You didn't have plate armor and a horse to ride against a knight face to face, and you would hide and shoot with a bow and arrow kind of deal. The breakthrough, I don't know if there was a specific defense, although the 4-3 was kind of taking over. I don't know if there was a specific defense that changed it so much as eventually there's a couple teams that started playing with three receivers and then running the ball, often from the shotgun, and then in particular, eventually with like the zone read play.
Right.
And there was one play in particular that old Chris Brown, not the performing artist, but the author of Smart Football. There's a particular game where a Northwestern team was using that strategy against one of the really good Michigan teams I think when Tom Brady was there. And Northwestern ran the ball for like 200 yards on Michigan and beat them. And he identifies that as a moment when people were like, wait. They
What is it?
they spread them out and then they ran the freaking ball. Like, that's not hiding behind a tree with a bow and arrow. That's manly. That translates in a big program. Like, that's where now we're interested.
So what we're seeing now, especially with the Sarkisian offense, obviously we're spreading people on the perimeter. We're putting absolute blazers out there that are making people that are spreading the field out. But how does that relate to what the offensive line is doing? Because we've seen a lot of oh shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Maybe explain a little bit how the offensive line relates to the running game in the spread offense, because it's something that you write in this article is essentially like we're clearing out the box as much as we possibly can to run the ball.
Well, it can benefit the offensive line. So like one of the big examples I mentioned, there's an article that went up on Inside Texas today. I originally posted it on americaswargame.substack.com called Spread 101. It kind of explains why the spread took over and the main guiding principle of that, which is running the ball. And I noted that Oregon was one of the teams that really started to stand out playing in the spread offense. And probably a lot of people look back on like the Chip Kelly Oregon teams and they think like high flying, moving down the field really fast, throwing the ball around. But those teams, if you watch them and you look at the box scores, their running backs were running for well over 1,000 yards every year. Sometimes they'd have like 2,000-yard running backs on the same team. And they didn't even have like an Alabama or a Georgia or Ohio State offensive line. They had like lines of nobodies, kind of like Leach built at Texas Tech, where it's like they would
I think
just
in that article you had the offensive line. I think one of the heaviest guys was what, 300 pounds, somewhere around the 290s is where a lot of them kind of lived in terms of size.
They got lighter, quicker guys for outside zone kind of blocking. And then they were like, well, here's the deal. We're going to spread you out. You've recruited a lot of big stuff the box kind of players. We're going to make them all get wide apart. If they don't get wide, then we'll throw the perimeter screens or whatever. And then we're going to even run zone read and plays like that to give us an advantage where our quarterback is reading a player and we don't even have to block him. So now our offensive line doesn't have to block all your big heavies because we've spread them across the field. They started using lightning quick tempo, so they would line up and run it over and over and over again, which guess what effect that has? The bigger you are and the more body mass you carry, LC.
You get very tired.
You get very tired. And then you can't even resist the two-star Oregon lineman, even if you're normally a lot stronger than him. And then, they were just pounding teams. And like embarrassing, like dropping 50 on USC, you know?
Right. I want to talk about some of this, how this proliferation of this offense has changed maybe the type of running back we might have and what type of quarterback is maybe necessary for this type of offense. But before we do, I want to hear from our sponsor today.
This video is brought to you by Luxe Kitchen and Bath. Luxe has been offering high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for 3 generations throughout the greater Austin area. With 5-star review after 5-star review on Google and Facebook, and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, you can put your faith in Luxe Kitchen and Bath's award-winning designers and skilled craftspeople to bring to life that dream vision of your special home. But that's not all. Luxe's all-star team provides full remodels, large additions, and even commercial build-outs as well. So call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUXE Luxe today. Or visit luxekitchenbath.com to discover where quality meets luxury and begin the process of transforming your home. Get a free quote today by calling 833-358-LUXE. That's LUXE. Or by visiting luxekitchenbath.com. Link in the description.
Again, fans of Texas of a certain vintage are going to harken back to those Mike Leach quarterbacks that weren't necessarily, you know, what you would consider a prototypical pro style quarterback. So what has evolved now that this has kind of become this, not necessarily the standard, but maybe the standard even in Texas high school football as we move forward? How would you describe the prototypical quarterback for a spread style offense?
Well, the NFL has gone in this direction too now, although there's been a little bit of a swing back at some places. But the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs play a lot of spread. The Tom Brady Patriots were almost like a Mike Leach team at times. Peyton Manning switched from 12 personnel to primarily spread with the Denver Broncos. None of those make the point, though. I think as more teams have gone that direction, the dual threat quarterback has become more of a thing at every level of football. Nowadays in the NFL, more people want that because if you only have your 5 offensive linemen and a tight end who may or may not even be that much of a blocker, then it gets hard to run the ball when you need to if the quarterback is not helping you out. And when you send lots of guys out into patterns and you have fewer people to protect the quarterback, it gets harder for the quarterback to have enough time to make anything happen if he's not creating time by moving around and making plays off schedule. So the downstream effects of that have been felt there, where like people want a Josh Allen, they're not afraid to draft a 5'11" Bryce Young or however tall he is, or
Right.
Kyler Murray, because it's like, well, these guys, they're going to help us by the way they move around in all the space we've created.
And with that, sorry.
Sark has resisted this, although KJ Lacey fits that mold, and I guess Arch does too. Really,
I guess that was the next transition. Now, now that now we are squarely in the Arch era, and someone that is an athletic quarterback, undeniably a quick, mobile quarterback. How do you see Sark's version of the spread offense changing moving forward, or does it change at all having someone like an Arch back there?
well, Sark has always tried to keep a foot in both camps, and everybody's seen he plays with 2 tight ends a lot. And his favorite way the last couple of years to close out a game after they build a lead
Sure.
is to play with 2 tight ends and run the dang ball in a more traditional fashion. Bleed clock, control the ball, all that. And also when you have that extra blocker, then you don't have the same impact I said before, where you don't need your quarterback to make plays as often. You can protect him and you can block everybody for the running back without needing the quarterback to do as much. The more you play in the spread, the more your quarterback inevitably just starts getting involved as a scrambler or an option or something. This year, they don't have as many tight ends as normal. And they have an enormous and quick quarterback in Arch Manning. And one of their better returning skill players is DeAndre Moore. And he plays, do you know where he plays, LC?
We're going to put him in the slot.
That's right. And you don't have a slot if you're playing with 2 tight ends.
Right.
Like you might create one, but that's not the position. That's the position that comes in and off the field based on whether you have the extra tight end or not. So I think this year we may see a much more spready Sark than we have before. He's been, I don't know if he's almost like 50-50 up till now. And then this year maybe, I don't know, 60-40, 70-30. We'll see how Spencer Shannon is as a blocker. And if they get to 50-50, you wonder if it will be just because they've been building up big leads and then they bring in extra tight ends to run out the clock. But it's not there. It's just a part of the strategy for closing out games and winning. It's not a we got to have it kind of go-to feature. I think they'll be lean on the spread for that.
And when in the next article, spread 201, you talk specifically about the tight end, but staying with the run game a little bit, so we just talked about kind of the prototypical quarterback there and what that quarterback needs to be able to do. Is there a prototypical running back for a spread style offense, or is it just best, fastest guy you can get?
So I have an opinion on this, and I don't know if it's universally accepted based on how teams pick their teams, how coaches pick their teams, but the whole point of the spread and the reason it took hold is that you spread them out so it's easier to run the ball inside, right? That's why
Right.
Oregon did that, and it took off. And then when they finally built their best team and made a run at the national championship, they lost to an Ohio State team that had built their roster around 4 and 5 stars to do the same thing and to stop it. And that's why they didn't get the crown. It's because the bigger programs had adjusted. The thing is if your goal ultimately is to be able to run the ball inside again, just from a different approach, then you need a really good inside runner. And so teams think of the spread, and they even think of Oregon, and they think of like DeAnthony Thomas and fast guys like that. But the feature runners for Oregon were generally big, thick dudes like LeGarrette Blount or
Right.
Royce Freeman, some enormous people often. If you don't have the guy that can run between the tackles, it's no good. So counterintuitively, I think the speed back is actually better in a bigger power offense because the power is coming from your blockers more so
Right.
than your back. And so if your blockers are supplying the power, it's good if the back is faster, can do more damage with the holes they create, and if he can threaten more of the field laterally for the defense to worry about while the blockers are coming to take their heads off. If your power is coming from the defense being stretched out, it needs to be the back running through overstressed guys, like running through arm tackles, running through lanes. So the counterintuitive sort of game theory of this is that if you condense everybody, you kind of want speed at running back. If you spread them out, you want size and power at running back.
I think one of the misconceptions you hear a lot about the spread is that idea that it's a lateral game. We're playing everything on a lateral thing. But what you're actually doing with that defense is, yes, you're spreading them laterally, but it is a very vertical offense. Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yeah, it's the lateral is unto creating a point where you can, concentrate the ball to push through vertically.
And it's essentially the same principle as a power ISO. It's just executed completely differently, right? It's just the spread is creating less friction for that running game, whereas in a power ISO, the friction is lessened by power and isolation of big, strong offensive linemen. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, maybe the peak example of this is those Tim Tebow Florida Gator teams. They actually, like, all their personnel were fast when they had Tebow, and their running backs were little fast guys. But they could do that because they could put 4 or 5 guys out in space, and then they had big old Tebow running the ball up the middle and just trucking people. So he was the inside runner that made it work. And it was just like an ultimate. It was an extreme spread stress. Because it was like, we're going to threaten you laterally like you've never been threatened before with all this speed and spacing. But then still, ultimately, it's just man ball inside with Tebow.
But again, what you're describing there is essentially a power back, right? It's that guy that can run between the tackles that became, a necessary feature of that.
Sam Ellinger, too.
Yeah, no, that's a really good. Yeah, that's an absolutely great comp. So I want to get to Drew Kielson, and then but before we do that, let's Z Holly here has a question, and this is Would it be safe to say that one of the major tenets of a Sark offense are those spread principles?
No, Sark is kind of unique. He's a compendium of football strategy and knowledge, and I think his main thing is how can I find ways to get receivers running behind people, and we're going to do a million different things in a million different formations, and all of it is going to make it really hard for you to stop our receivers from confusing you and getting behind you and our quarterback chucking it over your head. So he spread, sure. I formation, he full T offense sometimes when they were trying to figure out how to convert in short yardage last year. Double tight end. He's pretty eclectic.
Throws the whole kitchen sink at you.
His vinyl collection spans
Right.
genres.
Drew Kelson asks, or is basically putting, what is it?
I believe that's our boy Drew Kelson.
Nah, I don't know. What he's saying is that there are mismatches running spread with Arch and this spread on the outside. So we talked about this a little bit, but the whole idea of a Sark offense is predicated on exactly what you just described. Where can I find the mismatches? What do I need to do to create those mismatches? What does having a quarterback like Arch do for Sark in giving him more to play with when it comes to those mismatches?
Well, maybe the most obvious thing is actually just what I said about the run game.
Right.
It's easier if you have Arch and he's 6'4", 230 and fast, and you can run him a little bit. I mean, you could probably run him a lot, but they'll probably only run him a little bit and try to keep tread on the tires. Then it makes it easier to spread athletes out and hunt mismatches because you can still run the ball when you absolutely have to because you can use the quarterback to help you. Theoretically, if he is more skilled at the passing game than Quinn, that'll also help take advantage of mismatches.
Well, this is another point that Drew brings up is when he's talking about the experience at DB, obviously with in terms of the passing game, but also covering in the box. Why is Drew pointing out the depth specifically when it comes to this mismatches?
So if you spread teams out and you have 3 or 4 quality targets out in space, teams start to run out of guys that can actually turn and run and cover them. So, you can't, some guys you can't really cover all the time, but if you can at least make it a dicey proposition, if they're going to be open consistently when the quarterback's looking for them, then you're in decent shape on defense. If you get enough receivers on the field where you run out of good man coverage athletes or good zone match athletes, at some point there's going to be a guy that's just it's going to be like an 80-20 proposition for the offense every play. And then you get into real trouble. I don't know if Kelson has looked around at the secondaries that are on the schedule to say that, but in general, that's just if you have if let's say DeAndre Moore proves to be like an NFL caliber player in the slot,
right,
and then Ryan Wingo proves to be an NFL caliber player outside, you're already probably pushing 80-90% of football past their point of comfort with being able to cover. Because they're just not going to have – if they have one NFL caliber defensive back, they feel pretty good.
Sure.
The only teams that have 2 usually are like the teams that you find in the later rounds of the playoffs, like Georgia, Ohio State, there weren't that many last year.
Right.
Maybe Clemson. I don't know.
It's a principle that, like I said before, we're going to be talking about over the series of a couple of these things. But the next thing that we'll talk about, and we'll save that for another video, is we talked essentially about what the formation is, the importance of the role of the quarterback, what the running back, the prototypical running back would look like. When we get together next time, what we're going to talk about is tight ends and what a major role they play in this particular type of offense. Specifically, do we even have a hybrid? I think what you would call it a tight end that can block and then also catch the ball really well. And what kind of an absolute weapon that becomes when you have that on your team.
Truly
Uh,
rare.
well, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that when you find any position in any sport that somebody that can do all the things is
Yeah,
pretty is pretty rare, uh, which is the which is obviously why they're in such high demand. All right, guys, we really appreciate you guys checking in with us today. Next time, like I said, we're going to focus on the tight end. I really do thank Ian for doing this. Please check out his article at InsideTexas.com, and we will see you guys next time.